you so much for the introduction. I'm very excited at this conference today. Sorry, I'm just going to turn off my interpretation. I'm super excited. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining this session. As stated, my name is Kibwane Moloko, and I am proudly South African born and bred, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Queer Women in Business and Allies, which is a business and resource hub that specifically focuses on empowering and advancing African queer women entrepreneurs. So I'm excited today to be on the A-Team panel, and the reason why I call our panel the A-Team panel is that all of our panelist names interestingly enough, start with an A, and I'm going to introduce them one by one, and we're really excited to have this conversation around successful strategies for women entrepreneurs in Africa. And so my phenomenal panel of women, and I will start by introducing our Mary Khan. If I'm just introducing you, feel free to just wave your hand there. Our Mary basically is the CEO and founder of the Women Boss and Innovate Gambia, which is an initiative created to help to revitalize economic development in the Gambia and the region, and to be a catalyst for innovation for women and girls. She is also the president and co-founder of Point Click Technologies, an information technology company, and CEO of Icon, a consultancy. We're so happy to have you here. Our second panelist is Dr. Asfour, right there with us. Dr. Asfour is the president of BPW International, which is an international organization committed to connecting and empowering women globally with consultative status with ECOSOC and participatory status in the Council of Europe. She is also president of the Egyptian Business Women's Association, the African Women's Empowerment Alliance, the Afro-Arab Women's Empowerment Network, and Secretary General of the African Society for Scientific and Technological Research, among others. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Asfour. Another one of our amazing panelists, we've got Alisimo Mwanga, if you want to wave to us there. Alisimo is the Research Director of the Global Entrepreneurship Network. GEM is a trusted benchmark in entrepreneurship for key international organizations such as the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Really pleasure to have you here. And then our fourth panelist is Adama Paris. Adama is a Senegalese designer and entrepreneur, also the creator of Black Fashion Week, which was held in Prague, Bahia, Paris, and Montreal. She studied economics in France and worked in banking before studying and focusing on fashion. And shortly after that, that's when she created her brand Adama Paris as a fashion platform to promote her creations and those of other styles. I'm excited to have you all on this panel. Like I have said, feel free to unmute yourselves, and we're ready for this conversation. I think what a time, right, like this to be alive. I think we have recognized that there have been so many women who have been so successful across the African platform, but as well as in other continents as well. We've just heard news this past weekend, I think, of a thriving woman who is now, the vice president-elect of, the United States, being, of South Asian descent, being a Black woman, of African descent as well. And so we are really proud, I think, as women in general, and I'm happy to have this conversation with all of you who are individually doing phenomenal work that in itself really empowers and advances women. So I guess let's kick off this conversation around, the general question. I think it's well known, right, that being an African entrepreneur in general, right, presents a set of, unique challenges based on various factors. But I think there's some more nuanced challenges that African women entrepreneurs face. And I want to start with you, our Mary. Can you talk a little bit about, what are some of those challenges that women entrepreneurs face?
Sure. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me, Casa Africa, and the Women Impact Summit. So I'll just share a little bit that African women entrepreneurs face quite a lot of challenges. Some of these are no different other than other women entrepreneurs from other parts of the world face. These women obviously face the 3 C's, like, if you go into the United States, these are things that obviously they do as well, and in Europe, which are access to credit, to capital, and to collateral. And there is capital, but accessing it is almost impossible. One is that capital is very expensive with interest rates and terms that are not favorable for women entrepreneurs, which is pretty much predatory lending at most from local banks. Collateral is needed to access capital. We know that African women lag behind when it comes to owning such assets such as land, properties, due to gender inequalities that have plagued societies for years. And then the mechanisms for credit are still not as progressive as it is in other developed nations. And additionally, African women lack access to relevant technical assistance, international markets, mentorship. They also deal with challenges such as societal norms, religion, formal education, technology divide, lack of governmental support, etc. It's ongoing.
Thank you for that. I think you've highlighted some really, really key challenges there, including one of them that I think we understate a lot, which is the power of mentorship, right? This is why, so many various women's initiatives and networks exist, right, to be able to support, fuel the dreams of, women entrepreneurs as well. And talking about women's networks, Dr. Asfour, I know you are, this is your area, but I'd love to hear from you, what are some of these challenges that you have seen that are impacting women entrepreneurs on the continent?
Thank you very much. It's my real pleasure to be here in this great panel, and I would love to thank as African Women Impact Summit for inviting such a distinguished colleagues for such a very important panel. Well, actually, the challenges, Rawi have said 3 C's. For me, it's 10 P's. So it is really about the policies. This is a very important issue, the policies and the conducive environment with reference to empowering women. The second thing is, the second P is proper information about different access to many channels of agreements, of trade, of access. The third P is the payment and access of finance, of course, and the payment system, the payment methods, if she wants to have any transaction. The third is partnering with the right partners with reference. If she is, we're talking now about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. She wants to promote her products. How is she going to partner with other institutions? The fifth P is product development. We need to have the woman having her products developed with reference to all the branding, the designing, the standardization, the quality, and then of course packaging of her products, the popularity of her products, which is like advertising and marketing. Marketing is very important for our women entrepreneurs. And then the posting, which is, how she would really be able to ship her products with reference to air or sea, the infrastructure. And the real 10th thing is the perspectives. The perspectives with reference to all the things that we are having, like the cultural norms, the stereotypes that is happening, the language barriers, all these things. So those 10 P's actually would really have a very important challenges for our women entrepreneurs. And when we are talking, we would love to address the policies that would really, and the solutions for these challenges that would, that is the role of our organization to do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Asfour. I think you mentioned something that is critical, especially on our continent, right? Policy can either be, right, an open door or a roadblock, a big roadblock along the way, especially within business, within small business as well, and for women entrepreneurs. So I love that you mentioned that, and I do see there's some comments around that as well in the chat box. Alissimo, I would love to hear from yourself around, kind of perhaps your lived experience or just what challenges you are seeing.
Sure. Thank you so much, Gibone. And it's really awesome to be here today with such amazing women. And thank you to Casa Africa for the invite. I think for me, it has to do a lot with the social aspects of things, the social impact of social exclusion due to structural exclusion that has happened in the continent for so long. And another thing is that a lot of women are able to negotiate contracts really well in the beginning. We get really excited when the smallest opportunity comes our way that we find ourselves in a position where we're not getting the best deal out of this. And you also see in various reports, such as the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor report for women, which I previously contributed in 2016, 2017, but you see in that report also indicating that women are underpaid in terms of contract negotiations. And that's something that we don't really talk about a lot. I think we focus a lot on the mentorship aspect of things and the networking aspect of things. But when it comes to the crux of it, if you're not negotiating contracts really well, then you're already starting off at a very bad foot where you're not making enough profit to sufficiently grow. But then again, access to markets is another thing that is a real problem, although it is across board for all types of entrepreneurs, depending on which level you're starting with. You're dealing with economies, and especially with developing markets.
Alissimo, are you there?
Sorry.
No worries, you're fine.
Okay,
Continue.
I find it amazing that we have all these women networks, and I think it's fantastic, and I think it's a step in the right direction, especially you know, in a role for advocacy for policies. But I think it's really important to use those networks to create buying power for women to buy from each other. And I think that networks are not as effective in that sense. And men do it a lot. They have a huge boys club, and you know, I think women are starting to empower each other, but I think it should be intentional. And so that's just from my experiences and from the experience that I've been in the ecosystem, particularly in Africa for over 5 years. Those are the common barriers that I continuously see, and including myself, because I no longer am at Gen. I actually have my own business now. So I've experienced that a lot, and I feel like those are the conversations that we should be generally having. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think what you're saying is absolutely valid. It also echoes some of what Dr. Asfour was saying around, like, you know, the importance of access to information, right? I think that's the building blocks of all of that in order for us to be able to get to a point where we're able to negotiate on those contracts or be able to build our buying power is we need to know. And the first place that we can go to with that, right, is getting to know from each other, right? Leaning on each other for that information and being able to tap into our networks as well. Thank you, Alissimo. Adama, I'd love to hear from you. Can you chat to us a little bit about the challenges that you are seeing as well that women entrepreneurs are facing on the continent? You're on mute, Adama. If you can just unmute yourself there, no worries.
Sorry, excuse me. Hi, ladies. Thank you. I'm really glad to be part of this with you. As an entrepreneur in the art field, it's probably the same as Amani said and Alissimo. It's lack of really government support. That's really something that we're facing. It's also lack of proper education in our field. For instance, like just school for fashion, for art, for dancing. Like for instance, if you want your kids to be a ballet dancer or anything like that, you have to go to the US now, because we are not going anymore to Europe because it's too complicated. So and also I don't know who said that, empowering young women. This is really something we really need to systematically do. It's not part of some of our culture. Like mine, it's just like young girls are always okay. We take care of you when the boys are okay. And for my part in our culture, it's really present. Even if we in 2020, it's still something that we still. It's a challenge actually, and yeah, and like especially for my field, fashion. I've been in this business for 18 years, and and I mean, it's barely changing. It's just so frustrating. And now that the world is open to digital and all of that, and I'm lucky enough to be in Senegal because we, you know, it's okay here, but we can be. It's challenging to just have a good internet. How can you just go and be in a market where like everybody's out there digitally, and you know, not only the internet, but just the issue of shipping costs more than your item. How can you be competitive in this market? And I suffer because I'm not only a designer, I'm an entrepreneur guy. I produce different shows for 18 years. You know, I kind of create my own ecosystem to help all these designers, and especially the young one who just don't know how to do it. And the issue we really facing is like we are so far behind, not because we're creative or because we're good entrepreneur. It's just because we don't have the tools, the proper tools that we are not. You know, I'm not in Senegal. I'm like queen of fashion, whatever you call it, because I own everything. I own the TV channel. I own a TV channel. I own the Fashion Week. I own the magazine. So it's just I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad to be able to just be an entrepreneur and develop all these things for myself as a designer and for others. But this is not a normal way of doing business, you know, and that's probably my biggest frustration, is not to have something that we can build from, you know, you coming in this business and, you know, other are already like your first day, other are already there, and you have to build stuff that exists in other countries or other continents, and it's a frustration, and sometimes that they criticize us, African fashion. Yeah, we can see them in magazines and in shops, and you know, they're not, you know, yeah, but it is what it is. And finally, none of like the big investor I know invest in fashion. So that's that's our biggest issue, because you know, Isabel Marant, Dior, whoever name them, they have. You can't have a proper company without investors. So they're treating us still like it's a hobby, and they want us to be a businesswoman. You know, it's just, you have to pick.
Yeah, I completely hear you. I think, you know, from what you've said, we probably have 3 or 4 topics, right, on their own that we can really go into and discuss. You know, the challenge of having to go outside of our continent, right, to make it, especially within the fashion industry, for example. There's a huge gap there. It's like, why is it that, you know, we have to rely on external sources, unfortunately, you know, to be able to be successful and grow, you know, from where we are? How innovative do we need to be with our education systems as well? And not just the traditional education system, but the way in which we create and absorb information, you know, around entrepreneurship and business. Go ahead.
Yeah, and just to add, like, with your comment, and also we, like, this is from my experience as I come back home, and, you know, being in Africa, living here, you really have to unlearn everything you learn from them in a way, from Europe, from, you know, they teach you French, Spanish, whatever, but they teach you their way of doing things, and which is not the way we have to do things here, because everything is so different. So you can learn, and it takes time. So that's the time you waste. So for the future generation, what we're trying to do is just teach them right away that we are not Spanish, we are not French. Even if we want to be global, we have our own way of doing, and there's nothing wrong with it. And that is just something that we need to make relevant. This is nothing wrong to be South African and work with a local market. It's not a shame, and, you know, like, and learn the fact that we all need to be Dior or Gucci, whatever. We can have our own top model, our own top fashion designer, and for God's sake, try to trade in between us. We are the largest team, and we have that. Because, you know, like, when I see young designer, when they start, they always want to go to Paris. They want to go to New York. They want to go.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, thank you for that.
African. No.
Yeah.
lots of women out there, or lots of people from African descent. I'm criticizing ourselves. We don't buy enough of us.
Absolutely. There definitely needs to be an emphasis around, being proudly African. And I want to also just put this in here at this point, right? Remember, we're such a huge continent. I think a lot of the time we talk about Africa as one place. And yes, we are integrated in many ways, and kind of connected in many ways, but it's also very interesting and important to highlight that, each African country also has its own nuanced cultures, traditions, right? And systems. Like when we talk about policies, this is policies in all the different countries that we each represent and come from. And so it also kind of creates a complex, environment as well. I'm seeing a lot of comments. Thank you so much. And questions coming into the chat box. If you want to ask questions, please feel free to do so. I have some questions that I've got to ask the panelists, but it's really great if, this is more of an interactive conversation. I'm happy to take some of the questions from you. So, Mary, I want to come back to you, and in light of these challenges that we've spoken about, right? In your kind of opinion, what are some of the successful strategies that are being implemented, right, by either your organization or others in the ecosystem to tackle them?
Thank you. Yes. So for us at the Woman Boss, we create a safe space. We create a creative space really for women and girls, where we focus on innovation, entrepreneurship, and leadership. And within that, we help women to curate, innovate, and grow their ideas. But mainly for women entrepreneurs, what we do is we create different programming. And so one of the programmings that we actually have, it's called a 90-day accelerator program, where we have, different cohorts. Like currently right now, we are on our third cohort, where we have women entrepreneurs going through a curated curriculum. And then after that, it's a match with a diaspora successful women in the diaspora that will mentor them for 90 days. And we found that that's actually worked and helped them, because what we're doing, one is creating that not only that mentorship, but also the training that the technical assistance that they really required and needed. And then additionally, what we're doing is matching them, with the mentor and possible international markets linkages. And that's what's one thing that's been very, very, very lacking. What we found, I know that most of the entrepreneurs that we're working with right now, it's in the Gambia, even though we have, the following week, we have a global virtual accelerator program from women all over the world. From all over the world, actually. But I think what really needs to happen is creating that linkages, because like Adama just mentioned is, we have She Trades Now, for example, in the Gambia, and She Trades Now is penetrating Africa. But unfortunately, what happens is they tell you it needs to be a specific way of doing things. It's almost like you have to check boxes for you to have that access to link it outside. And so we as as African women, and we deal with, at the Woman Boss, we deal with all sorts of entrepreneurs, whether it's from fashion industry to women fish in the fishing industry, from agribusiness, food processing, etc. And so we try to find that market and that market linkages. And sometimes it's very, very tough, because Dr. Amani actually mentioned a little bit of that, saying is the packaging needs to be right, because you have very limited resources in Africa, especially in the Gambia, where, one, you don't have organizations that can even certify your product for you to go into the international market. And number two, you have very limited resources in terms of, mentorships and women that are willing to do that, and the time. You have a woman that's usually a wife at home, running and cooking, running a business, has a job. And so, you tend to find lots and lots of hurdles that you really sometimes don't find somewhere else, because there's some sorts of segregation. And I think, Dr. Amani really covered a lot, that those are the things that we needed. So for us at the Woman Boss, we try to leverage that. We talk with government, try to see how we can change policies for women to make it more favorable for them. But it's still a long shot to say that this is going to be strategically, this is what's best for women in Africa. We still have a long shot.
Amazing. I think definitely still have a long shot. What you said there on the challenge of, having to tick the boxes, right? The question around that is firstly, who's creating these boxes and what's their knowledge, right? Of the kind of like groundwork, more nuanced challenges, right? That each, kind of diverse business that you mentioned actually goes through and faces. And that's some key issues that you really highlighted there. I'm going to go to Elissimo. Can you talk a little bit about, what are some of the lessons of successes and failures that you have learned on your entrepreneurial journey, and what would you do differently with what you know now?
Sure. So for me, what I definitely would do differently, I'd start there, is I would have started my entrepreneurial journey very long time ago. But I don't take away from any of my experiences, because one of the things I feel like led to my successes was getting the right and relevant work experience first, because I feel like getting into the corporate world, or working is part of a university for you if you actually want to go out and start your own business, because it's the opportunity for you to learn on somebody else's budget. It's an opportunity to learn how to sell. And if you don't know how to sell and you're going into business, then it's going to be very, very tough for you, because customers are the most important thing. So for me, getting the right work experience, working on the right projects, put me in the right spaces to speak to the right people and create the right connections for you to actually get into business. Because one of the things that people don't really tell a lot of these young upcoming entrepreneurs is the fact that it's all well and good to say that you want to start a business, but in Africa, let's be realistic. If you don't have the right social networks, it's almost impossible for you to get anywhere. You can have an amazing product, an amazing business, but if you don't have the right social networks, unfortunately, in Africa, like my sister Adama over here says, you have to literally go outside first and make a name for yourself, and then come back and try again. So for me, the biggest lessons for me was definitely my work experience journey has been really great in propelling me to be where I am today. I learned a lot from the people that I've worked with. I was exposed a lot. So I worked in different environments where I got to travel. I got to see how different countries are able to, how people run their businesses in different countries. And I think us as Africans, particularly in South Africa, where I live, people don't really travel just outside of their provinces, let alone to another neighboring country, just to see what the opportunities are. And also with digital and technology that's available to us, I don't think us as women particularly use that to our advantage. You'll find a lot of people that don't really have much to offer, but look really amazing and are packaged well, get the exposure because they put in the effort. And that comes from a lot of self-doubt as African women. I feel like because we've been told so long that there's something wrong with us, or we're not perfect just the way we are. So we don't feel confident enough to put ourselves out there. And I feel like now is the time where you're able to speak to anyone, anywhere, and just build the self-awareness that you have the ability, and get rid of, the imposter syndrome. I think that's a huge, huge problem amongst women across board generally. So for me, those are some of the things I've had to overcome myself personally. And another thing that we don't really take into consideration is mental health, wellness, and self-care. That is so important to get your mind right, because then everything else falls into place once you start doing that. And I'm not perfect. I'm still on the journey to getting there, but I think those are the things that I would advise a younger version of me to be able to take those tips myself. I think I'd be really far now, but nonetheless, we continue the journey.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks, Juan. Are we out of time?
We are out of time, sorry. Thank you for the excellent, conversation. I really appreciate your time, and we have to continue because we have to have plenty of things to talk about this evening here in the islands.
Thank you so much. It was great.